What did you do with your non-working shark problem? Did the sharks?
No one expected Steven Spielberg to speak, not about this, not about him, but when the rumors exploded across Hollywood, silence was no longer an option. Two giants of cinema, two storytellers who shaped generations. One sudden wave of whispers, and everything froze. Steven Spielberg and Rob Reiner had always lived in different creative worlds. Spielberg built universes that pulled audiences in and refused to let go. Reiner mastered something quieter, sharper, more human, laughter mixed with pain, friendship wrapped in honesty, different styles, same devotion to storytelling. For years, they crossed paths at award shows, private gatherings, late night conversations where ideas flowed freely. There was no competition, no ego, just deep creative respect. A bond built not on publicity, but on understanding what it truly means to tell stories that matter. And then everything cracked. Out of nowhere, shocking rumors about Rob Reiner's family began to spread online. Headlines twisted facts, whispers grew louder by the hour. Social media fed on fear, not truth. Hollywood stopped breathing. Spielberg felt it hit him like a punch to the chest. Just days earlier, he had been standing beside Rob at a quiet gathering. Rob was smiling, not the polished public smile people knew, but something warmer, real. He couldn't stop talking about his son, Nick, about how hard the road had been, about addiction, relapse, and finally, hope. That happiness wasn't staged, it was written all over Rob's face. They talked about future films, untold stories, dreams that still needed to be brought to life. Two old storytellers still hungry, still believing, and then the internet turned that joy into chaos. False reports flew faster than facts. Exaggerations became headlines. Fear became entertainment. The emotional weight crushed everything before the truth had a chance to surface. For Spielberg, it felt unreal, a nightmare no director ever wants to step into. Watching someone you deeply respect become the center of a storm built on distortion and hunger for drama. When the truth finally emerged, the damage had already been done. And for the first time in years, Steven Spielberg broke his silence. Not as a legend, not as a filmmaker, but as a friend. When Steven Spielberg finally spoke, it wasn't rehearsed. There was no polish, no Hollywood filter, just emotion. His voice was low, steady, but heavy, like every word carried years of memory. Rob wasn't just a colleague, he said. He was a friend, a companion on this long, unpredictable cinematic journey. You could see it in his eyes. This wasn't about damage control. This was about pain. Spielberg didn't speak like a man defending a headline. He spoke like someone trying to process fear, the kind that hits when you think you might lose someone before you're ready. As cameras rolled, he drifted back to the beginning, to the early days, when both of them were still just dreamers in Hollywood, trying to prove they belonged. I remember Rob back then, Spielberg said softly, so full of ideas, always sharp, always funny, but never arrogant. His hands tightened slightly as he spoke, as if holding on to something fragile. Those memories weren't distant. They were alive. He began listing the films not for the audience, for himself. The ones that made people laugh, the ones that made them cry, oh, the ones that quietly changed lives. Rob didn't just make movies, Spielberg explained. He made connections. Filmmaking isn't just art, he said. It's human connection. The words hung in the air. To him, Rob wasn't just the man behind The Princess Bride or When Harry Met Sally or Stand By Me. He was the filmmaker who understood friendship, vulnerability, the silent battles people fight when the cameras are off. And then Spielberg's voice softened, because behind the admiration, there was worry. Watching someone you respect go through something so personal, so terrifying, leaves a scar, especially when you've seen their strength up close, especially when you know how hard they've fought. Spielberg admitted that what shook him most wasn't the rumors themselves, it was how fast the world believed them, how quickly compassion disappeared, and how easily lies became louder than truth. That moment, he said, was a brutal reminder of how fragile reputations are, even for legends. And then, almost reluctantly, Spielberg shared something he rarely talks about. A memory, private, unfiltered, a night that revealed the side of Rob Reiner almost no one ever saw. It happened years earlier at a laid-back Hollywood get-together, music humming in the background, people laughing, old stories floating through the room like cigarette smoke. It was the kind of night Spielberg usually enjoyed from a distance, not because he didn't like people, but because he could always sense what was happening beneath the surface. He watched faces, read silences, noticed the things others missed. And that's when he saw Rob, not in the center of the crowd, not cracking jokes, not holding court. Rob Reiner was standing off to the side with a drink in his hand, looking drained, distant, like his body was there, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. Spielberg felt it immediately. Something wasn't right, so he walked over, gently, quietly, the way you approach a friend you don't want to embarrass. "It's been a long time," he said, "but you don't look too well. What's going on?" Rob hesitated. That pause told Spielberg everything. Rob let out a deep sigh, then motioned toward the balcony, away from the noise, away from the crowd, away from the part of life where you're expected to smile even when you're breaking. Out there, under the night sky, the atmosphere changed. The laughter from inside became muffled, like it belonged to a different world. Rob leaned on the railing and stared into the darkness for a long moment before he spoke. Then he opened up. He told Spielberg his son, Nick, was struggling deeply, not a rough patch, not teenage rebellion, something heavier, something that had been tearing their family apart from the inside, addiction. Rob didn't blame anyone. He didn't lash out. He didn't perform. He just spoke like a father drowning in fear. He described the endless cycle: treatment, structure, support, hope, then relapse again and again, like a storm that never fully clears. And even as he explained it, Rob tried to smile, tried to keep his usual mask on, but his eyes betrayed him. Spielberg would later say that pain was unmistakable, the kind only a parent can carry. Then Rob's voice dropped lower, rawer. "Steven, Nick's been struggling with addiction for years," he admitted. "We've tried everything: treatment, structure, support, you name it." He paused, swallowed hard. "But somehow, relapse keeps pulling him back." The words didn't sound like a confession. They sounded like surrender. Rob kept staring upward, eyes locked on the night sky, like he was begging for an answer that never came. Then he said something that burned itself into Spielberg's memory forever. He told Spielberg that he had poured his soul into making Being Charlie, hoping that somehow, in some strange way, the film might help his son, or at least bring the family closer together. For a while, Rob said, it worked. Nick stayed clean for some time, but now, Rob's voice tightened. It feels like we're back in the storm again. Spielberg listened without interrupting, because there are moments where advice feels useless. where the only thing you can offer is presence. Then Rob's words cracked into something even darker. "I'm terrified, Steven," he said. "I wake up scared that one day I might lose him forever." And in that instant, Spielberg realized something the public never saw. Rob Reiner, this man known for warmth, humor, and timeless stories, had been living in quiet fear for years. Spielberg leaned closer, speaking softly but firmly. "Rob, you've done everything a father could possibly do." He told him Nick was lucky to have both him and Michelle fighting by his side. But Rob shook his head slowly. "Sometimes," he admitted, "we listen too much to doctors and not enough to our son." Then he whispered the sentence that made the night feel colder. "I just want to save him, but the harder I try, the more helpless I feel." The balcony went silent. They sat there, sipping wine, staring into the distance while the party continued behind them like nothing was wrong. And Spielberg never forgot that conversation, not for years, not even when time moved forward and fate brought them face to face again. Time passed. Life moved forward the way it always does, quietly, relentlessly, but that balcony conversation never left Spielberg's mind. It stayed with him, etched deep, resurfacing in moments of silence, in late nights when the noise of Hollywood finally faded. Then in October 25, fate pulled them back into the same room, the Governor's Awards, hosted by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, a room glowing with history, prestige, and Hollywood royalty. Bright lights, tailored suits, familiar faces trading memories from a lifetime in cinema. Spielberg stepped inside, scanning the crowd out of habit more than intention. And then he saw him, Rob, across the room, laughing, surrounded by friends, standing tall. For a split second, Spielberg froze. That wasn't the man from the balcony. That wasn't the exhausted father staring into the dark. This Rob looked alive. Spielberg didn't hesitate. He walked straight toward him, and when they met, they hugged tightly, the kind of hug that says more than words ever could. Two men who had survived the same storm, even if in different ways. "Rob, you look great," Spielberg said, genuine shock in his voice. "How have you been?" Rob pulled back, his face lighting up in a way Spielberg hadn't seen in years. "Steven, you won't believe this," he said, almost glowing. "Nick's home." Spielberg felt it hit his chest instantly. Rob kept going, his words spilling out fast, full of relief. "He's doing so much better. Clean for months now, working small jobs, talking with us again. It feels like before. Hope, real hope. Not the fragile kind you whisper about, the kind you feel." Spielberg squeezed his friend's shoulder, pride and relief washing over him. "That's incredible," he said softly. "You and Michelle never gave up." And this time, when Rob smiled, it wasn't forced. It wasn't rehearsed. It was joy earned the hard way. The two of them stepped off to the side, talking the way they always had, about new projects, fresh talent, stories still waiting to be told. But even as they spoke, Spielberg couldn't stop looking at Rob's face. That smile carried something different. It carried survival. Later, Spielberg would say that moment stayed with him. The warmth, the laughter, the sense that after years of darkness, light had finally returned. But life has a way of reminding you how fragile hope can be. Just months later, everything changed again, and this time, the shock cut even deeper. Spielberg would later say he still remembers the exact moment his body reacted before his mind could catch up. The jolt, the sudden tightness in his chest, the feeling that something was wrong even before he fully read the words on the screen. The news broke quietly at first, then it exploded. Headlines everywhere, speculation, confusion, heartbreak. Just months after that night filled with laughter and relief, the world was suddenly talking again. But this time, not about recovery or hope. This time, it was tragedy. Spielberg sat alone by a window, staring out into the distance, barely moving. His mind replayed that evening at the governor's awards on an endless loop. Rob's smile, his voice, the way he said, "Nick's home." He could still hear himself saying it back. "Hold on to hope." At the time, it felt solid, earned, real. Now it felt painfully fragile. Hollywood reacted the way it always does, fast, loud, emotional. But Spielberg withdrew. He didn't rush to cameras. He didn't fuel speculation. He didn't perform grief. Instead, he reached out privately. His message to Rob and Michelle wasn't written for headlines. It wasn't crafted for public sympathy. It came straight from the heart. He spoke of compassion, of sorrow, of respect. He called Rob a wonderful friend, an extraordinary colleague, a gifted storyteller. There was no drama in his words, no blame, no questions asked, just humanity. Behind closed doors, Spielberg struggled to process the emotional whiplash. Hope had returned and then vanished in what felt like a single heartbeat. The kind of emotional turn no scriptwriter would dare invent, because it feels too cruel to be believable. The days that followed felt heavy. The industry felt quieter, like something unspoken had settled over Hollywood. Trying to make sense of it all, Spielberg did something deeply personal. He went back to one of Rob's films. He watched The Princess Bride. As the movie played, he smiled through tears, caught off guard by how something so light could carry so much meaning. When that familiar line echoed through the room, "As you wish," Spielberg whispered softly to himself, "Rob, you lived fully, and your work will never fade." In that moment, he wasn't watching a classic. He was remembering a friend. But the story didn't end with grief. Because when Spielberg finally spoke publicly again, what he chose to say revealed something even deeper, not just about Rob Reiner, but about who Steven Spielberg truly is. When Steven Spielberg finally addressed the world again, his tone was different. There was no speculation, no anger, no performance, only restraint, only grace. He reminded everyone of something Hollywood often forgets in moments of chaos, that behind every headline is a human life, behind every rumor is a family, and behind every great film is a person who felt deeply, loved fiercely, and carried their own quiet battles. He spoke about Rob's creative spirit, his humor, his warmth, his humanity. None of that, Spielberg said, could ever be erased. Hollywood felt dimmer in that moment, like a light had briefly flickered. But the films, the stories, they stayed bright. They always would. Truth be told, Spielberg and Reiner were never the kind of friends who spoke every week or dropped by each other's homes unannounced. Their bond wasn't built on constant contact. It was built on respect. Deep, unshakable respect. Both men believed that storytelling was more than entertainment. It was a human force, shaped by culture, by faith, by childhood homes filled with questions and creativity. Reiner leaned into grounded, human-centered stories about friendship, love, fear, and the quiet war inside the soul. Spielberg chased wonder on a larger scale, building worlds that felt enormous yet deeply personal. Different lanes, same mission, no ego, only admiration. They crossed paths over decades at award shows, seminars, industry events, always greeting each other with genuine warmth. Reiner once said, Spielberg's ability to blend emotion with imagery was something every director could learn from. Spielberg returned the praise without hesitation, calling Reiner's understanding of everyday humanity rare and irreplaceable. That kind of praise isn't casual in Hollywood. It's the highest form of respect one filmmaker can give another. And in the end, that respect revealed something even more powerful about Spielberg himself. A man who values people over fame, compassion over noise, truth over spectacle. After everything, decades of success, heartbreak, friendship, and loss, Spielberg summed up his philosophy with a simple reminder. Awards fade, fame fades, but people are the story. And that truth lives on in every frame, every character, and every emotion his films have ever touched. If this story moved you, take a moment. Think about the film that changed your life, the story that stayed with you long after the credits rolled. And remember, the greatest legacies aren't built on headlines, they're built on humanity.